It's spooky season. Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. My name is Kaylee.
And my name is Desi.
Be sure to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case, please report it to your local police and sheriff department. Please be advised, this video is not for persons under 18. This video will include some very graphic details which may be disturbing to some. If you cannot handle this, please click off now.
Today we'll be uncovering the unsolved murder of Carina Saunders. Carina Brianne Saunders was born July 17th of 1992. She's the oldest of 9 children. Carina grew up in this little town in Oklahoma called Mustang. Carina attended Mustang High School, where she joined honors choir. She was most known for her beautiful smile and lovely voice.
Like any musician, Carina knew she might not be able to make a career out of music. If that did not work out, she aspired to become an accountant, which would have provided her with a stable career. In 2010, she graduated from Mustang High, 1 year ahead of her class. Sadly, in 2011, she suffered from substance abuse.
However, that summer, Carina decided to make better choices by attending rehab. Her mother even states that she felt her daughter was getting on the right track again. September 18, 2011, Carina said goodbye to her mother. About 1 week later, she posted on Facebook, "What's everyone doing tonight?" That was the last post anyone would ever see from her again.
So, the day of her disappearance. So, on the day of her disappearance, with September 28, 2011, Carina and her cousin, they had been hanging out for like a week ahead of time, and they were going to go to Tacobell. Carina was wearing a pink brand shirt, and then Carina was also supposed to meet this man named Kenny Richards at Tacobell. Carina's parents hadn't seen her for a while, so they eventually did report her missing on October 10th. Her parents didn't know too much information about this Kenny guy.
Ew, Kenny. So, about this Kenny guy. Kenny was somebody that Carina was involved in. Some people implied that he was possibly her pimp, but Carina told others that he was gonna make her a porn star. Kenny was accused of, at one point, making a nude video of Carina and even was accused of soliciting her for prostitution. The day that Carina was last seen, he would later testify that he picked her up that afternoon and that the two had hung out together, quote unquote, for a brief period of time before he dropped her off at an apartment complex in Bethany, Oklahoma. He was the very last person to see her.
So, finding her body. So, on October 11th, 2011 is when basically the police made a discovery of her body. So, basically, they found that all of her body parts were placed inside a plastic bag, and they were separate. And then this was at this Homeland grocery store, which was just a couple streets down from the Tacobell she was last seen. Her head and neck had been placed in a smaller bag. It was clear that obviously she had been murdered and her head had been decapitated. And based off of her body decomposition, the investigators say that her body had to have been left out there 3 to 4 days. October 17th is when finally the police were able to verify, yes, that this was Carina, and they went to her parents immediately and confirmed to them that the body belonged to their daughter, which is definitely a parent's worst nightmare to find. Yeah, their body like that. And it's definitely weird how like her body was placed, like her body parts were placed separate from each other.
Yeah, just a little weird, man. So after her body had been discovered, they did do an autopsy. They didn't even know it was her to begin with. Basically, her hands, feet, as well as some portions of her forearms, and her left breast, and her clothing were missing. couldn't be recovered. There was duct tape. It appeared that she had been tortured, possibly raped, and on her upper back, between her shoulder blades, there was a tattoo that read Queen Spade, and it looks like there were regular cut marks around it, which indicates that it was an attempt at removing it, which is crazy.
Yeah,
that
sounds really painful. Yeah.
In her toxicology report, they found that she had been positive for tramadol, which those who do not know what tramadol is, which I do because I work in an orthopedic office, it's a non-narcotic pain reliever. It's mostly used to treat nerve pain, so it would be very strange for her to have that in her system. And it's also a prescription drug, so it has to be prescribed. You can't get it over the counter.
So Carina did have a long-lost friend, which should come forward to talk to the police. So this long-lost friend, his name was Keegan, and he says that on October 8th, when he saw Carina, she walked up and gave me the biggest hug. We chatted for a time, and she explained to me that she was assisting my apartment with repairs as soon as she was living with him and his son, end quote. So basically, to give a little context about that, Carina actually supposedly went to live with this handyman in this apartment complex that she barely even knew. And then Keegan says that it was clear that Carina appeared to be starving, that she hadn't eaten in a few days, and that she only had a small bag, so he decided to give her a bigger, large green duffel bag with some stuff in there, just so that she would have more stuff, because she just didn't have a lot of stuff, and it was clear that she had been starving. There is some information that I do want to know. So Keegan did call the police later to see if her body was actually found in the green duffel bag that he had. Fortunately, her body was not found in that bag. It was a different bag. The police are unsure of her relationship with the handyman. They've even asked Keegan questions, and he doesn't know too much about that. So my question for you is, why do you think she was living with the handyman?
She could have decided she didn't want to live with her parents anymore, or she was dabbling into drugs and he was her supplier.
Yep, that's a good answer. Another question I have is, why do you think Keegan called to ask the police if her body was found in a large green duffel bag that he gave her?
Well, first of all, he gave it to her. Second of all, if she was carrying it with her, somebody could have used it as a resource to stuff her body in, or that could have been an important detail as to who might have been a likely suspect.
Yeah,
but he didn't want to reveal that to police.
Right, that's definitely true. I do find it weird that he asked. I can kind of see it both ways, but it is a little bit weird.
After this, they did find some footage on Saturday, October 8th, which was the last time that we know she was alive up until. On that day, she was spotted outside of Newcastle Casino, which is roughly 20 miles south of Bethany, Oklahoma, which is completely opposite of where good old Kenny Boy dropped her off, supposedly. But in this footage, Carina is seen getting into a red truck, which is described as a large four-door pickup truck with a brush guard and lights on top of it. And apparently it looks like a group of men were inside of it, but only one person can be described. Of course. How convenient.
Right.
As you know, this footage shows that Carina is getting into this truck. There is a vehicle that is parked nearby, and in this car is a group of young women who are seen to be pleading with Carina not to get into that pickup truck. So that is the last place that the police actually have on her. Not sure who these people were, but why do you think that she got into a red truck full of random fucking guys?
I think one of the reasons why she might have gotten into the truck, a random truck full of guys, is if she was involved with sex trafficking somehow, and that she had a pimp and basically he was paying her, and she just basically, even though like really bad things can happen, obviously, who knows, she might have been on drugs too, but she probably trusted this quote-unquote pimp and decided to get in this car full of guys thinking that she was just gonna, have a good time with them, and then she was gonna end up being paid for it in the end. And sadly, some people, that is the only way that they feel like they can really pay their bills or live their life, so that might have been the only life that she knew at the time.
My next question is, as far as the group of women go, could they have possibly been victims of these men themselves, and that's why they were pleading with her not to get in this truck? Or was it the fact that they just had a very bad, suspicion about the men in the truck?
I think it can go both ways. I definitely, though, do think that these women probably might have known those guys, and they might have been actual victims of sex trafficking, and they felt like if they, begged and pleaded for her to say that she might actually stay and she might not go and they might save a life. Unfortunately, she went anyways, but I can also see that these women might not even be victims at all. If I was in a car with my friends and I saw some other girl going into a car full of strange men, especially older men, I would probably tell her to stay, because obviously it's very easy for men to take advantage of women. So later on, a threatening text message was sent. So on October 9th, Carina's cousin, Catherine Bloodworth, received a text. And this text is really chilling. So it says, "I'm going to bury you next to Carina," end quote. And this text was supposedly sent by a guy named Kyle Savage. And Kyle Savage, later on, he goes to the police and he's like, "Oh, it's not what you think it is. You're taking it out of context." Which I still think, even if you're saying that in a joking way, that's really fucked up. Especially the fact that at this time, Carina is missing. That's just really messed up. Catherine decided to take this information about this text to Carina's mom, Margie Queen. And once Margie Queen saw this, she was horrified, obviously, so the next day she decided to officially report her daughter missing. Because if you see something like that, from this time on, she didn't know anything about where her daughter was. But the fact that some dude out there says, threatens her niece, "I'm going to bury you next to Carina," obviously they had to know something. So my question to you is, why do you think Kyle Savage sent this text to Carina's cousin, Catherine?
To try and scare her. It could have been the wrong text sent to the wrong person. He could have easily thought it was somebody else and not Carina's cousin, Catherine. Could have thought that it was possibly another man trying to go after Carina.
Do you think that this Kyle Savage dude could be involved? Because at this time, they still did not know. The body had not been found, and they didn't know, Carina was dead at this time. So do you think he could have been involved?
He could have easily been involved, but also not at the same time, because with the way he was texting her cousin and stuff, you would think he would have probably been sloppy about it and left some sort of evidence as far as his involvement with her.
Right, that's true. That's really the only evidence the police really have. They don't have a whole lot going for him.
Alright, so on to our other person of interest is a guy named Cody Perez, and he was an acquaintance of Carina's. He was somebody who was going to a local culinary school and was working at Olive Garden at the time of her murder. But on that day, October 10th, he had decided to skip town and pawn his knife collection off to a pawn shop in Bethany, Oklahoma. And then after that, he left. The rumor that was circulating around was that he had begun hitchhiking, heading out to the southwest, which would either be Arizona or California, which later on, he was found in Arizona. He claimed that his move out of state was purely coincidental and was related to a dispute he had gotten into with another man, which was like a relationship squabble, but claimed that it had nothing to do with Carina. They did check the knives that he pawned off, and there was no sign of any human blood. There's that, and Press never said anything that seemed to incriminate him in any way, so he was cleared. My question to you is it really coincidental that he left, or does he potentially know who was involved in Carina's death and that's why he left town?
I can see either way. It could just purely be a coincidence because we don't have any hardcore evidence of him being guilty. The fact that the police end up checking his knives didn't find any blood on it or anything, or any DNA. If that pawn shop was doing it the proper way, they probably would have reported it if they did find blood on the knives and stuff like that. But at the same time, I could see how he could be hiding something. He could be involved because there are some shady pawn shops out there. Not all of them are going to know how to check. Also, there is ways to clean off blood off the knives. And just because he pawned off those knives doesn't mean that that was the weapon he used to kill her. He could have used something else and hid that somewhere else, but just sold that so he would have a little bit extra cash so that he could escape and go out of town. He might have definitely left town because he knew something, and it's just easier to get away from town, and it's much more difficult for the police to really look into him and try him, stuff like that. So I think it is very possible he could be involved.
My next question is that this wasn't mentioned earlier, but police kind of did single him out for the fact that he had numerous juggalo tattoos all over his body. Do you think that this could have been the police's way to try, and I mean keyword try, to link this guy to the juggalos to make it into an even bigger case to kind of, bring more friction to it and catch even bigger, people, I guess?
I think it definitely is very possible. Some people definitely do come off more as what people would call as the perfect suspect, even if they're not involved at all. Unfortunately, there's a stigma around tattoos and even bald people too. A lot of people, they'll see someone who's a guy, he's bald, he has tattoos, and they think that he automatically is a serial killer. And that's not always the case. Sure, some people with tattoos do crimes, but there are plenty of people that don't have tattoos and have committed even worse crimes. So I do definitely think that the police could have just singled him out because of his tattoos, and it would have just gained more traction and attention from the media. And people just thrive off of that energy from the media. It's fucked up, but people love that attention. And, maybe they felt like if they couldn't get the actual suspect, this was the second best suspect. Now into the video of the homicide. A witness called Tia Downer on May 2012 went to a Bel Air motel with her friend Louise Breathe. Apparently when she went to the bathroom, she took his phone and she says that she watched a video and she started to play it, and then she stopped at the part when the victim's foot was getting cut off and she heard a scream. She immediately shut the video off. And this Lewis dude was a former teacher. He was also involved in drug trade. July 5th, 2012, him and Jimmy Macy got charged for shoplifting. However, the police went to look more into them being potential suspects, but The police looked through people's phones, everything, and they found no videos at all. Also, later on, when Tia was asked again about the video, she ended up changing her story. Instead of saying she watched the video, she says she heard her friend watch such video. Then another witness also came forward. Her name was Michelle, and Michelle says that both Lewis and Jimmy kidnapped her and did horrible things. And then she talks about how whenever she was kidnapped, that she witnessed both Jimmy and Louise murdering Carina. However, because there is no video evidence, and because of just her body parts being all cleaned up and put in those bags, unfortunately the suspects were eventually let go and the case fell completely apart. And in fact, Lewis went after the police department to sue them for all this, because this got the media attention and it blew up, and it caused a lot of people to say a lot of shit about him that he obviously didn't like. Say if we know if he's involved or not, because a video was never found. So my first question to you is, was there an actual video of the homicide, and why have we not found such video?
I think it's very possible there could be a video of the murder. It could be very well hidden. It could be on someone else's phone. That's why. Or what Tia thought she watched could have been potentially fake, and Luis did it just to kind of rouse her up.
Okay, another question I have to you is, why did Tia change the story from she watched the video to now she heard of the video of someone else watching it?
She could have easily been threatened by somebody to change her statement and say that she watched, heard of the video instead of actually watching it. They didn't want her on the stand as a witness, as a credible witness at that. So they threatened her life, and of course, in situations like that, people tend to do fight or flight response and take back what they've said.
My last question to you is that Michelle, which was another witness, said that she actually witnessed the murder of Carina. How true do you think Michelle's story is?
I think Michelle's kind of full of shit, to be honest. Because if that was the case, she would have came up front sooner. Although, with that kind of thing, it could be a situation where she was threatened to be killed if she had actually seen the murder. But I feel like she would have had more details to her story if it was completely true.
I definitely agree. It is definitely you feel like she would come forward a lot sooner. But again, it's hard to say what you would do in that situation.
Was Kenny Richards involved in this?
So I think it is possible that Kenny could have been involved. In the beginning, we talked about how Kenny and her relationship was kind of weird, and he supposedly posted a nude video of her and it blew up and she was upset, and he said he was going to make her a porn star. Also, the fact too, he says he dropped her off at an apartment, but the last area we see her is actually at a casino. So it's how did she end up getting there in the first place if he didn't drop her off? And he really was pretty much the last person that saw her before her disappearance or whatever. He was involved in a lot of drugs and sex trafficking. And just the way her body was found definitely pretty much proves that she was a sex traffic victim.
And the last question is, who do we think did it?
There's a couple of people, but the main person that I feel had to have a lot of involvement in it is definitely Kenny. Because I just mentioned, he was taking new videos of her. Said he dropped her off at the apartment. which isn't actually really him lying, but then she was found in a video with a casino, and also when she was in that casino found leaving, she's going in a red truck, and one of the persons that they pretty much noted in there was Kenny. So it's just definitely very suspicious that, you know, she went in this truck and he's one of the person that was supposedly in there. And then just the way, like, there was duct tape on her thigh, so clearly that indicated that he probably did rape her. And, you know, he was involved in the sex industry and saying that how he can make a porn star out of her. So I definitely feel like he had to have involvement in it.
I personally think that it was the unknown assailants in the red truck. Although one of them was more identifiable than the others, the police could never truly identify them, but it's very suspicious she got in that red truck and was never seen again. So I feel like from the red truck is
Right.
quite likely, but also like Luis Ruiz is also a good suspect too, because if he was involved in the drug trade and
That
she
is
was
true.
involved in drugs at one point, they could have crossed paths and something could have went wrong.
Right, and he also had a long criminal history too. So even though like the video was never found like him with his criminal history, I wouldn't put it past him either. Yeah, heck, it could have been Kenny, Jimmy, and Louise all in that truck, and someone else possibly too. The FBI did provide assistance to the Bethany Police Department with this investigation. Over 80 suspects were investigated, but 0 arrests have been made. To this day, we do not know who mutilated poor Carina and why they chose to. Carina Saunders touched many lives because of what happened to her. Her own sister, Sarah, is going to school to become a detective. We hope one day Carina's family receives the justice they deserve.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Remember to always keep your eyes open because you never know when someone's creeping.